Yeah, so next I'll go over a few things you can do to improve your performance in the game, both like from in-game settings, but also just in terms of making the game run better. Because obviously, if you play Onslaught, you have a lot of enemies on the screen, and that is really stressing for the computer. And so you obviously want to squeeze out every bit of frames you can have. So generally, if your computer is not that strong, what you can do is just set everything to lowest. That's like the simple thing that you can do. And also having FOV very high is going to impact the performance, but high FOV is recommended for playing modded. And so one thing that is very nice is having max second frames on 1. You have less latency between your mouse and between your input and what you see on the screen. And another thing that's important is particle quality. You should not set this to lowest. There are a few particles that you cannot see when you set this to lowest. For example, hexed enemies from Chaos Waves, which are maybe they're in some difficulty mods. They are not visible if the particles won't be visible if you have this on lowest. So that should be left on low. Then what's also very nice to have is this thing, auto exposure speed, to have this on max. If you have this very low, it takes very long for the lighting to adjust. If you think of Convocation of Decay, if you, at the end event, if you jump in or out of the ring, you want this transition between like dark and light to be very quick. So that's why you leave it up. And then next is the super resolution. So if you are running on a screen that's like 4K and you like playing on 4K, you should turn this on. And depending on how much image quality you want to have, you set this to quality or just ultra performance. Since if you're playing on like 1920 to 1080p, you just leave it off because it's actually not worth it at that point. Also here for NVIDIA reflex low latency, you leave this on enabled. Enable plus boost isn't giving you any advantage. Leaving this on enabled gives you also less latency between your hardware and what you see on the screen. And so there's one thing that's kind of a good thing to turn off, which is bloom. And that is really dependent if you like to have the lights very bright. So if you turn this on, all of the lights are going to look much nicer. So let's just go to Sienna. So for Sienna, her flames, right, they have more of a glow to them. But if you play this on modded and you have someone constantly spamming flames, it's going to be super bright on your screen, especially if you have a warp fire as well in your face. So I'd rather have it turned off to not blind myself. And those are the few simple things you can do. So there are a few more things you can do to squeeze out even more performance, and that starts with editing the config files of this game. So once again, to find those config files, you go to this app data location, and so you type %app data %, and over here you just go to fetch.arg. So that's over here, Vermintide 2. And then there are these files here called user settings. And so inside these settings, I've already made one on a low, with a low setup for having better performance. So I'm just gonna rename this to copy for now. And so this is gonna be the original one now. So whenever you change these user settings, I recommend making a copy beforehand, because sometimes if you type in incorrect settings, the game will reset this file, and that means all your game settings plus your mod settings might get lost. So create a copy just to be on the safe side. All right, so we're gonna go over this just to see what we can set up. So most of these settings you see here are the ones from in-game, and there are also the settings from the mods saved in here. And where we want to go is towards the end of the file. So you can also press Ctrl F and just search for render settings. So over here at render settings, the first thing you can do is you can change process priority to high. That's something you can do if you want. Then this thing, DirectX 12, it's generally recommended to use this if you have lots of stuttering when you play. you should set this to DirectX 11. Also, if you use DirectX 12 for the first time, basically your game is compiling the shaders while you're playing. So the first time you play with DirectX 12, it will be a bit stuttery. So play a map, restart the game, and see if it still stutters. If it's gone, you should stick with this. And now as for the render settings, there are a few settings which make a huge impact on your performance. Most of the stuff here, if you set your in-game settings to lowest, and then this one particle quality thing to low, your settings will be on custom. And afterwards, you'll go in here and first look for local lights, which is over here. So this is a setting I don't necessarily recommend. This is really if you really, really need that last bit of performance. If you play Blight Reaper, with this setting, it's going to be almost impossible because the first section is going to be completely dark for you since you've turned off all sources of light. So yeah, the torches won't work anymore. As for Hunger of the Dark, that map still works. It's just going to be very dark, but it's still visible. So if you don't play Blight Reaper, just turn this to false, and yeah, that gives you quite a boost. Also, this works for official RAM as well. So any of these settings will also boost your performance for official RAM. So that's the first big one. Then we have an LOD object multiplier, which is here. So this here basically sets how close you have to be to an object for it to be rendered. So if you set it to 0.7, that's roughly where you get a performance, but objects are still rendered in. If you set it too low, objects will just straight up be invisible for you, like the ground or something. So this one, set it to 0.75 if you want to. And then there is static sun shadows. That's always nice to have low. So these sun shadows, you don't really need them. Shadows make a huge performance impact in this game, especially on modded. So turn off all shadows, do yourself a favor. And yeah. Then there's the last one, which are the texture settings, and these are over here. And so this is the one setting that's going to make your game look like Play-Doh or like, I don't know, Minecraft or Roblox. It's going to make the texture quality really low because the game thinks your character model and the models of the objects are really far away. And so by using this setting, everything gets rendered with super low textures. So I'm just going to start the game up again just to see the changes now. Whoops. Okay. And so while the game starts, this is a guide that I made ages ago. It might be a bit outdated now. This goes over each step, so in case you didn't pay attention, you can just go onto this guide. You can probably find it on Steam very easily. It's just called Potato PC Guide, and it just tells you or goes more into detail about the settings. So for now, I only went through the most important ones, just so you can see the effect of it. All right. Okay. So while the game is starting here, there's also a thing I've read online, which is whether you should use full screen, borderless full screen, or windowed mode. So from what it seems, full screen should give you the best performance, but it has a downside. There's a mod called DPS meter, and if you want to use that, you need to be in windowed or borderless full screen, which is windowed full screen. So that's why, yeah, kind of a choice you have to make there. And yeah, you can see now everything is, well, in super low textures, the quality of the character as well. And if you go to this hero selection screen, you see local lights are off, which means there's no more lighting here. And you can also choose what you want to have. So as I said, you can set it here for the characters. This might be a bit small maybe on stream, so I zoom in a bit. So here you can, for the characters, set it to low if you don't want the player characters and enemies to have high quality models. If you don't care about your weapons, set it to low. And as for the environment, this is a special case. In Convocation of Decay, there's this puzzle part, and if you set this to very low, you won't be able to see the puzzle anymore. So that's, yeah, where you have to make a decision. If you have other players that can see it, then you're good to go. All right, let's just have a look at Hunger in the Dark just to see how the dark section looks like. Because if you go to Blight Reaper, it's going to be pitch black and you won't see anything at all. In Hunger in the Dark, luckily it's not the case. You will still be able to see a little bit.
But the Rockbloods are turning regular old trolls into those awful bile spewers. Fight your way down and destroy the altar that's transforming the beast.
Let's just...
You'll need black powder, but there's plenty
let's just hope we don't hit a death wall. So be a bit annoying. Okay, where am I? Okay, this is this section here. Alright, so next we are over here. And this is the dark section in Hunger in the Dark. And so if you have local lights off, you see that you can still see things. And yeah, it's still pretty good visible. And also if you were playing the game and found certain aspects of the map to dark, you can always set gamma up high. So if you set it very high, it's going to be a lot easier to see in here. Now, generally I prefer leaving it on 3 though. Alright, and so this is how you can boost your performance. But apart from that, there are also a few settings we can choose to make for just your gameplay.
Rockblood sorcerers are using some kind of altar to churn them out, and it's up to you to disrupt the whole operation with a bloody
Alright, here we are again. So let's just go to spawn tweaks real quick, just to turn off the enemies. Alright, okay. So now, there are a few settings I want to go through that are very interesting. And so the first one we have is in the gameplay section here under input. So I guess for most people, yeah, mouse sensitivity is very important, and yeah, you can just look it up online how to convert it from maybe if you play a different shooter game to Vermintide. Now, one that's very important here is called input buffer and priority input buffer. And so as it says here, it's the window where inputs will be buffered. So just to give you an example, if I set this to 0 and I left click twice, it's not going to do the second attack because it basically waits until the end of your animation before you can chain the next attack. So if I set this up to 0.5, I press left click, yeah, it's gonna chain the second attack. And so this allows you to make basically frame perfectly chained attacks. And the priority input buffer is the same thing, but it isn't for the basic attacks. It's for special actions that are considered as priority, such as weapon switching. So for example, if I were to charge this attack and I hold, but I'm also holding block at the same time, then yeah, switches back to the weapon very quickly. Now if I have this on 0, let's see what's this here. But if I have this on 0 and I perform an attack here, it's not going to do the weapon switch immediately. Like it's going to wait until the end of the animation before I can do the weapon switch input. So that's why I really recommend leaving that very high. Alright, then the other settings, visual effects, usually I turn it off. One that's really nice to have is player outlines, to have it always on. If you turn it to on, it won't be visible when you're next to your bots or players. So always on is highly recommended. And the minions here, those refer to the skeletons from Sienna. I prefer to have them off. I don't like having too much stuff on the screen, and the minions, yeah, I'd rather have it off. Alright. Then there are HUD settings here. There's one thing here, the interface, the old menu layout. And so this one is very nice to have. on, because if you use gift weapon to spawn in weapons, you see this interface, and this interface, as well as the interface for changing characters in the middle of the map, is not going to work with the new UI. So old UI is recommended here. Yeah, and then you got these HUD settings. So these all exist in form of mods. You can use UI tweaks and numeric UI to get all these options, just way better. So I prefer to have this off instead of using the in-game UI. All right, and then let's see. So apart from that, there are a few keybinds I want to go through, and that is, one is for dodging and jumping. By default, the game has jump and dodge on the same key, which is on space, and that's very inconvenient. We want to have it on separate keys, and the reason is there's a tag which is like dodge jumping, which means you dodge and then you press jump right afterwards. And this is really nice for kiting. And if you have this on, if you have dodging and jumping on the same key, this dodge jump tag is just not going to work very, very well, because you have to press space a lot just to get this jump after the dodge, and it will mess up the timing between dodging and jumping, because you want to have the jump right when you lose momentum from the dodge. So have those two on different keys. Then another one is tagging and social wheel. I'd also recommend having it on separate keys. If you play modded, tagging enemies is very important, so please put it on a separate key and put it on a key that you want to press. If you're lazy, you can put it on left click like me, but that leads to having pings that are not high quality. So if you want to make quality pings, put it on a separate key. Yeah, and then that concludes almost everything. So a few nice things is just showing numerical latency to see how your connection is to the host. And yeah, these are the settings you can have to make your game run better. One is for performance and the other is just, yeah, the mods. Now I'll just quickly go over the mods that are available. There's quite a few mods in this game. Just the most important ones for adjusting your in-game UI are crosshair customization, crosshair kill confirmation, then UI tweaks, which I have at the top here. And yeah, I recommend downloading this, trying it out, and adjusting it the way you like it. So this UI that I have is very close to the original UI, but for example, I've like to have the chat box a little bit higher, so when I type in something, I can see the suggestions here. And another one that might be interesting for some people is accessibility captions, which prints out sound effects. If I spawn in a assassin, it gives me this little box here that shows me in which direction it roughly is. So yeah, you can have a bunch of different settings with these mods. And yeah, this concludes the section on performance. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, yeah, thank you. Janoti, is he here?
Oh, I'm muted here. Okay, hello, yeah, I'm here, absolutely. Thank you so much for your introduction into the settings of the game. Absolutely, very, very interesting stuff. Lots of new stuff in there as well. I didn't know about the changing of the lighting and how you can make it adjust so it still works in Hunger of the Dark and so on and so forth. In case you have any more questions right now, this is the time to ask them. We are still here, we could answer them in case you have any. We have looked into how we can install our mods, how we can work around crashes and what we can do once we crash, how we can adjust things in our config file even, which is the file which hosts all of our settings from the game for mods and everything related to it. And we have also checked out the settings in game that we can adjust to our liking, and also quite a few different mods that allow you to do very cool things. In case you want to try out more mods, there are of course a lot more, as you have already seen probably here and there. Many of them are very, very good. and many of them allow you to practice better or to explore the maps a bit more in detail, and that way you can also practice all these modded difficulties very, very well. Do you have any more questions? Otherwise, I think this concludes our first Onslaught University stream about setting up your game and your mods. It does not appear to be the case. Oh.
I think someone got one.
Do you need to bring a torch when you can see in the dark? Yes.
Not
No,
really. Yes, it's not really. Like, if you turn off local lights, in Hunger in the Dark, you can still see without the torch, because the darkness in Hunger in the Dark is like a fake darkness. But in Blight Reaper, you have like true darkness. Like, if you go in there without a torch, it's pitch black. And if you turn off local lights, the light that you get from the torch is gone. So that's why I recommend leaving local lights on if you still want to play Blight Reaper. But if you are not going to touch that map, having local lights off gives you a huge performance boost, because it just turns off all the light sources on the map. So yeah, you need a torch for Blight Reaper, but you need to have local lights on.
Yes. We also have our schedule here for the next coming days, where there will be more different Onslaught University streams that will go over a couple more topics that you might be interested in. You will see all the schedule also pinned in Reddit or posted in the Discord server for the Onslaught series. You will also get notified about the streams, and there are events you can follow. So if you are interested, keep an eye out, because there will be a couple more streams coming this and next week, with the next week concluding the captain's event on the 12th and 13th. So let's keep your eyes peeled for that. And in case there are no more questions, I'd say thanks a lot for watching, everyone. Thanks a lot for all your questions and your participation, and I will see you, or we will see you, in the next Onslaught University stream.